Hello and welcome to Gardening Green Expo 2021. The Expo is sponsored by WaterSmart South Shore, the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, Kennedy's Country Gardens, Wild Ones South Shore Mass Chapter, and Edibles South Shore and South Coast. Now I'd like to give you a few Zoom tips. If you scroll your mouse down to the bottom of your screen, a toolbar will pop up. And in that toolbar, you will see a chat function. And I've posted some links to some resources and things you might need in there. And then at the end, we'll address questions. So if you have questions, you can type them in the Q&A bar. Kerry will also pause momentarily throughout the presentation to answer questions. So I'd like to introduce Kerry Richardson.
Well, thank you very much, Lori. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and our guests. The picture that you showed at the beginning of the webinar had a beautiful echinacea flower there, and it had a bee on it, and two monarch butterflies. And, that's what we really want to do today, is emphasize the environment and also the ability to attract, animals, bees, butterflies to our backyards because they're environmentally friendly. And you want to be able to grow beautiful, amazing, fragrant flowers, great vegetables that are great tasting. What I'd like to do is basically welcome everybody. And I'm going to call you plant lovers this morning because I think, that's one of the reasons you're here, is that you want to grow beautiful plants, whether they be trees, shrubs, flowers, vegetables, or have a great lawn. So, our goals, I think, for today are to try to answer as many questions as possible, and for all of us to become better, smarter, environmentally friendly gardeners. So you can grow amazing plants, spend less time in work, and hopefully enjoy your garden more. My background, oddly enough, is about 35 years in the insurance industry, and now about 12 years in the fertilizer business. My son, Kevin, has 22 years in the fertilizer and soil industry. And he studied with a woman by the name of Dr. Elaine Ingram. And Dr. Ingram is a guru within the soil industry. She's written a book, called the Soil Food Web. So if you ever want more information about, the discussion we're going to have today, please get her book. It's fascinating. And what she'll tell you is that we've learned maybe about 5% of what we think is going on in the soil beneath us. So we've got a lot more to discover, explore, and learn in the future. My own family has had problems while gardening. And one of the problems is, the amount of time and effort it takes to resolve problems that are occurring out in the garden. Some of those problems occur, because of the environment that we live in today. Some of them occur because of the toxic chemicals that either we ourselves have used or our neighbors have used. And those chemicals float in the air. And they can travel up to about 15 miles. So, if even though you may not be using chemicals, your environment is being influenced by that. Sometimes also we may use an organic product, but that organic product may not have all the proper ingredients in it, or it may have too much salt in it, or it may have unprocessed manures or compost that's not fully composted. And it may have elements in it that are not easily absorbed, by the plant. And those are what cause, soil and plant problems. Our family, believes that you shouldn't have to sacrifice convenience. You shouldn't have to use toxic chemicals, except every once in a while to eliminate an issue that you may have. And you can eliminate most soil and plant problems. And that's why we as a family started the business of Organic Plant Magic. We wanted to do something good for the environment, and we also wanted to improve people's lives. Today we're going to discuss the fundamentals of a healthy living soil. I'll try not to use scientific terms. If I do, please send a note to Lori, and she'll ask me to stop, and I'll try to further explain what I just said. Soil health is defined as a continued capacity of soil to live as a vital living ecosystem, and that sustains plants, animals, and ourselves as humans. The definition speaks to the importance of managing soils so they're sustainable for future generations. And to do this, we need to remember soils contain living organisms. And when these organisms are provided the basic necessities of life, like food, shelter, water, they perform functions required to produce their own food and fiber for those living organisms. So soil is not in an earth-growing medium. It's teeming with billions of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, arthropods. And these arthropods that are in the soils are both micro and then other insects like spiders and centipedes. In the ocean, the arthropods are like lobsters, shrimps, crabs. And then you got the earthworms. And then you got the birds that come around and eat. And all of it together is an elegant symbiotic relationship called our ecosystem. And our ecosystem can be managed to provide nutrients for plant growth, absorb and hold rainwater for during dry periods, filter and buffer pollutions from leaving our lawns and gardens, and it serves as a habitat for soil microbes to flourish, diversify, and keep the ecosystem running smoothly. I'd like to just stop for a moment, and if there are any questions at this time, I'll try to answer them.
I don't see any so far. I did post the soil food web link in the chat bar.
Okay, thank you, Lori. So let's get into the inherent and dynamic properties of the soil. And you've got 4 types of soil. One is sandy. And sandy, the definitions, it's composed of many irregular, tiny, round grains of sand, as opposed to many tiny plate-like soil particles that make up the clay. So if you can imagine a glass of ping pong balls, that's what truly sandy soil looks like under a magnification. And sandy soil drains extremely well. Then you got the clay soil. It's essentially composed of several minerals deposited together. Over time, they form a hardened clay deposit. So it's comprised of like silicates, mica, iron, aluminum, that are most common found in clay deposits. And clay does not drain well. Then you got silt, which is solid dust-like sediment that water, ice, and wind transport and deposit. It's made up of rock, mineral particles that are larger than clay, but smaller than sand. And silty soil is slippery when wet. It's not grainy or rocky. And the soil itself is called silt if its content is greater than 80% of silt. Now, the best type of soil is loam. And that's made up of a balance of sand, silt, and clay. And as a general rule, loam should consist of equal parts of all three type soils. And loam creates the perfect soil texture for plant growth. Unfortunately, here in New England, we mostly have a sandy loam soil. So it's a little more difficult for us to grow, great plants, but, we can modify those soils, and we have the ability to do so through various methods. So soil quality is dynamic, and how soil changes depends on how we manage it. And management choices affect the amount of soil organic matter, the soil structure, the soil depth, and the water and nutrient holding capacity. Any questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay. So let's go into the soil biology. And the creatures living in the soil are critical to the soil health. They affect the soil structure, and therefore the soil erosion and the availability of water. The biology can also protect plants from pests and disease. And what the biology lives in the soil, it's focused and concentrated around the root zone, which is called the rhizosphere, but it also lives on your plant leaves. So if you have, I don't know which one, somebody likes the Patriots, but when Brady used to play for the Patriots, he had an offensive line that would block for him so he wouldn't get injured. Well, that's what, bacteria do, beneficial bacteria. They'll live on the leaf surface of your plants, and they'll actually block pest and disease from penetrating the leaf surface of your plant. That is, if you have a healthy plant. They also live on the root zone, and they block pest and disease from getting to the roots of your plant. It's like me, I'm sitting in my chair right now, and if you try to sit in my chair, you're going to have a much more difficult time sitting in that chair than if it was empty. So consider, those bacteria as offensive linemen, and if you can get a lot of different species of bacteria in your soil, your plants are going to be much better for it. All this beneficial bacteria are also essential to decomposition and nutrient cycling, and therefore affect the plant growth and the amount of pollutants in the environment. And the soil is home to a large proportion of the whole entire world's genetic diversity. And that's why, I mentioned earlier, Dr. Elaine Ingram said, we only know about 5% of what's going on in the soil, because it does have such a large proportion of that world's genetic diversity. How do you get soil health management? So we say, your soil will work for you if you work for your soil. You need to use management practices that improve your soil health, and you'll increase productivity within your plants. A fully functioning soil produces the maximum amount of products at the least amount of cost. So you can go out and you can buy a whole bunch of different products to feed your plants. But if you're not feeding your plants appropriately, you've spent money, you've spent time, and you may actually negatively impact your plants rather than help them. So let's believe I'm a plant, and you decide to go get a fertilizer. and that fertilizer is a chemical fertilizer. And you water me with that chemical solution, and it goes into your soil. Well, that chemical solution basically stays where you placed it. And if it has too much salt in it, you're going to burn your plants. If it has other properties in it, you can do other damage to your plants. And you can also kill off the biology in the soil. And once you kill off the biology in the soil, your plant no longer has the ability to feed that biology, and the biology no longer has, there's no biology there to feed your plant. So chemicals can do a lot of harm. Whereas if you use a more organic approach and you use an organic product that has the appropriate ingredients and does not have too much salt in it, then what you're going to do is feed your plants appropriately. And you're going to help feed that beneficial microbes that are within the soil. And we'll discuss that a little bit more a little bit later. So a fully functioning soil produces the a maximum amount of products that your plants need to feed themselves at the least amount of cost. And managing for soil health is mostly a matter of managing and maintaining a suitable habitat for the myriad, excuse me, of creatures that comprise what's called the soil food web. And Lori brought that up, on the screen so that, look at the soil food web and you'll see a cycle as to what's occurring. And what you want to do in managing your soil is disturb the soil as little as possible. So that means don't till. And I know, when I was a young gardener, I was taught to till the soil every spring. Dig it up, so it's not compacted, and, get your garden growing. Well, that's wrong. It's now been proven that if you till, you actually compact the soil more than if you don't till, because your microbes have already tilled the soil for you. They've created tiny little air pockets. They've created, porosity in your soil. They've created air pockets that some go like this and they don't retain water. Some are cupped like this and they're very, very microscopic, but they retain little droplets of water down, where the plant roots are. And that's why you want to have microbial activity going on around your plants. The other thing is to try to grow as many different species of plants as practical in your gardens. So, some people mulch because they feel, it's a great ground cover. But an even better ground cover is a green mulch, some type of a plant that covers your soil, because what's happening is that those plants are feeding the microbes within your soil on a continuous basis then. So if you don't have plants in your soil, the microbes basically don't have food to live, because your plants are giving the microbes the food. So as often as possible, keep your ground covered with some type of plant and rotate your plants throughout the year. So if you start with string beans, and then they die off, let the dead roots stay in your soil. Those dead roots become food as they get processed and decomposed, by the decaying process, and microbes are eating them. And then the microbes are feeding your plants with the next crop that you're going to plant. So keep the soil covered, whenever possible. Let's go into some of the details. Disturbance can be the result of either a physical, chemical, or biological activities. We talked about tillage results in bare, compacted soil. It's destructive and disruptive to soil microbes, and it creates a hostile environment for them to live. And then misapplication of chemical or inappropriate organic materials also disrupt the symbiotic relationships between the fungi and other microorganisms and plant roots. And plant roots can burn. If you apply too much chemical fertilizer, or if you apply an organic fertilizer that has too much salt in it, you will burn the roots of your plants. So try not to use chemicals. Again, sometimes you may have to get rid of a disease or a pest, but it's like, if I get sick and the doctor prescribes a penicillin for me, I stay on that penicillin for X period of time, and then I get off of it. So do the same thing. If you need to apply chemicals for a certain reason, use it for that particular reason, and then get away from it whenever you can. Plant diversity, another detail. To improve soil health, ensure that food and energy chains and webs consist of several types of plant, not just one or two. So do that crop rotation within your soil. So who now remembers, your science class and the process of photosynthesis? And plants use sunlight, and they can use that sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates serve as the building blocks for the roots, the stems, the leaves, and the seeds that your plants produce. They also interact with specific soil microbes by releasing carbohydrates through their roots into the soil to feed the microbes in exchange for nutrients and waters. So what we call, through photosynthesis, the plant is absorbing that sunlight, creating, carbon, and just, as you and I, when we absorb food, we can only retain X% of it. Well, so can the plant. So what the plant does, just like you and I, they poop. And what they poop are called exudates, E-X-U-D-A-T-E-S. And they're simple sugars and carbohydrates. So at Organic Plant Magic, our family, we call those exudates cake and cookies. And when the plant poops those exudates, they poop them mostly through their root zone, but they also poop them out through their leaves. So you have, bacteria, and you got fungi, and you got another one called protozoa. So we like to call bacteria Billy and fungi Freddy and protozoa Popeye. And when the plant poops these exudates, these simple sugars, Billy and Billy the bacteria, Freddy the fungi, and Popeye the protozoa, they come to the party because they like to eat those cake and cookies. And then what do after they eat those cake and cookies? The same thing that we do and the same thing that the plants do. They poop. And what do they poop is plant nutrients that are easily absorbed, by the plant. And since the roots are where those exudates are being pumped out, the Billy and Freddy and Popeye are pooping right in the root zone, right in the rhizosphere. And so then the plant, that's why the plant can easily absorb them. The other thing that happens is there's a certain type of fungi called the Mycorrhizae. And Mycorrhizae is the rock star of the beneficial bacteria. They're the ones that attach to what they call the hyphae. And those are very, very small hair-like roots that are on your plant. And as they attach, basically, those hyphae are growing. And so as the roots grow out, and because they're pooping the exudates, those bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa are following those roots, and they continue to feed it. So what happens is your root zone starts to exponentially expand because you've got all that living ecosystem in your soil, and your soil's great, you've managed it well, so your root zone can expand well. You know, we're a business, and we sell a fertilizer, and we had a garden center owner who brought home 13 shrubs one weekend. And what he did was our fertilizer is a miconized powder, and you mix it in water. So he made a 5-gallon bucket full of water with our fertilizer in it. And he took his 13 shrubs and he did a root dip with them in the water. And our fertilizer is comprised of all these different beneficial microbes. He then planted them. Well, then he sat back and he looked at his 13 shrubs and he said, oh my goodness, you know, I didn't do this right. I spaced them wrong, etc. I got to go buy more. So he went back to his garden center, and next weekend he brought, I don't know how many more home, but he had to dig up a few to space them appropriately. When he dug them up and he compared the root size of the ones he had planted last weekend compared to the root size of the ones he just brought home this week, the root size of the ones he had planted last week had doubled in size already. That's great for the plant, and because it's going to produce a better plant. So if you create the right soil environment, you're going to allow your plants to grow to their maximum genetic potential. And what does that mean? It means you're going to get more beautiful flowers, more fragrant flowers. You're going to get more pest-resistant vegetables. You're going to get more tasty vegetables. You're going to get stronger plants that are going to be able to resist pest and disease. So what you're doing by managing your soil conditions is improving the ability for all your plants to grow to that maximum genetic potential. Lack of biodiversity limits the potential and increases the percentage of you're going to have disease and pest problems. What you want to do is create the environment within your soil so you get healthy plants, and the pest and disease are outcompeted by the beneficial microbes. Same thing happens, on your lawn. If you can create that healthy soil environment, your grass will outcompete the weeds. Now, if you do it in an organic way, it'll probably take you 2 to 3 years to get a really true healthy organic lawn, but you will outcompete those weeds. I'm not saying you're going to eliminate weeds 100%. You'll have to probably hand pick some so you're not using chemicals, but you're going to get rid of most of your weeds by creating that healthy living soil environment. A diverse and fully functioning soil food web, provides for the nutrients, the energy, the water cycling that allows the soil to express its full potential. And once your soil expresses that full potential, your plants can grow to their maximum genetic potential. So, we talked about trying to keep a living root growing system throughout the growing season, and why that's important is because your living plants maintain that rhizosphere. That rhizosphere is feeding your soil. The soil is feeding, your plants, and it's basically a closed system then, and that's where everything is going on, and that's where the peak nutrient and the water cycling occurs, right around that root zone. And that's why you have to water less, so you're conserving water if you create the right soil environment. So growing long season plants or a cover crop following a short season plant will continue to feed the foundation species of that soil food web. And the healthy soil is depending upon how well the soil food web is fed. So sugars from living plant roots, recently dead plant roots, plant residues, soil organic matter, they all feed the many and the varied members of the soil food web. And if you cover that soil as much as possible, you're conserving moisture, you're reducing the temperature of the soil, you're actually intercepting raindrops, and raindrops can be destructive when they hit and have an impact. You're suppressing weed growth, and you're providing habitats for members of the soil food web and that spend at least some of their time above ground. Now there are, some microbes, and I mentioned that Mycorrhizae as the rock star. They die off by sunlight. So if you do foliar sprays and you're using Mycorrhizae, we know that the Mycorrhizae are not going to live. But the foliar spray also, if you got bacteria in that foliar spray, they are going to live. And when they get on that surface of the plant leaf, those bacteria are going to protect the plant from the pest and disease. And pests, have tiny, tiny, tiny teeth. So if you feed your plant appropriately through the soil food web, the cuticle of your leaf is going to get thicker. And therefore that pest is not going to be able to bite through that cuticle of your leaf. So your beneficial bacteria are out competing the pests and disease. And that's why you want to have beneficial bacteria on the leaves of your plants, also beneficial bacteria in your soil, the beneficial fungi, mycorrhizae in your soil. What's going on in your soil is life and death. We talked about Billy the bacteria and Freddy the fungi and Popeye the protozoa. Well, Popeye the protozoa, he consumes bacteria and fungi, and he's doing that, and that's also helping the plant because, basically he's pooping and he's pooping the nutrients, but he's also, it's called a cation exchange, and I'm not going to get into the ratios, but basically a cation exchange occurs down there, and it's all about the carbon. And the carbon is the energy in your soil. And you want to have as much carbon as you can in your soil because that creates that healthy environment. And I know, one of the other speakers in this on a webinar talked about biochar and the carbon that's released in the biochar. And it's extremely important to have that, in your soil. Let's also talk about a foliar spray. If you can ever do a foliar spray on your plants, there's two benefits. One, your plant actually feeds itself more effectively through the leaf because the leaf is built more efficiently and effectively to absorb plant nutrients than your root zone. And secondly, if you can get beneficial bacteria on your leaves, they block the pest and disease from penetrating the leaf. So if at all possible, do a foliar spray, and then secondly, definitely do the root drench. Don't just do a foliar spray, always do a root drench, because you're driving mycorrhizae into the ground when you do the root drench.
Okay, Kerry, we've got a bunch of questions that have popped in. Would you like to take a few of them right now?
Sure.
Okay, the first one is, the person who owned my house before me put black plastic over the soil. Then they covered the black plastic with mulch. I've been pulling up this black plastic. The soil underneath is awful. Is this due to the black plastic? I've been adding lots of composted cow manure. What else should I do?
Good. So, when you say that the soil is awful, you might be seeing mold, and you think that's awful. Well, I'll tell you that I've mentioned we make an organic fertilizer, and all of our microbes in our fertilizer are dormant until you rehydrate them. But let's say you open our package and you don't properly seal it, and you use some of the fertilizer but not all of it, and you don't properly seal it, and therefore moisture gets into the package. Well, that moisture activates those microbes, and you'll start to see mold growing inside our package. And some people say, oh, it went bad. Well, it didn't. It just means that the microbes have become active, and they're living, and they're creating that mold. So, that could be happening in your garden because that was covered, all the moisture's there, and the microbes, microbes live in the top few inches of your soil, the majority of them. There are some that have been discovered in oil wells 10 miles deep. Microbes have been discovered that far deep. But most of your microbes live in that top few inches of your soil, let's say top 4 to 6 inches. So that's where all the activity is going on, and that could be causing what you think looks awful. So just, you may want to just, I said don't till the soil, but you may just want to put another layer of what you did, put compost on top, let that decompose, and you should be fine.
Okay, the next question is, what is a good cover crop for vegetable gardens?
Oh, great question. And I was thinking, I was walking around my backyard this morning and said, what cover crop? What cover crop? I don't have a specific answer for you. Please, if someone would Google that and let everybody know, that'd be great. But legumes, come to mind. I'm trying to remember the other one. Clover, is a great cover crop. Anybody else have, just write an answer in there, please, and somebody Google it, and we can all learn more about it.
Okay, the next question is, how much salt is too much salt?
Oh, great question. I just picked up my own package. We have 0.01%, so less than 0.1% of salt in our fertilizer. And if I, let me move away from the screen for a moment and pick up another package of somebody's fertilizer. I'll try not to show you this brand because I don't want to say anything bad about another brand. I'm trying to find their. If you start to get, over 1% or more salt, you probably have too much salt in it. I don't see it on their brand right now. I'd have to get my other glasses probably to find their ingredients here. But
While you're looking at that, someone said winter rye is a good cover crop.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead, ask me another question. I'll try to keep finding, see if I can find the salt content on there.
Okay. Our property abuts a pond, which, as many bodies of water are, is victim of nutrient pollution. Organic fertilizer is still fertilizer. How do you reconcile this with promoting fertilizing?
Great question. So what you want to do, I think I started this webinar with the basis that our family started our business because we wanted to help the environment and we wanted to help people. And my son is an environmental scientist. And, when we first started the business, we said, we're not even going to go into any type of packaging that, can't be basically recycled or decomposed and we unfortunately couldn't live up to that promise because the packaging that we created decomposed on the shelf of a garden center, and consumers didn't like that. So we had to go to different packaging. But we created a fertilizer that does not leach. And if you use too much of it, it stays in the soil in reserve until the plant calls to be fed. So it's the job of the microbes to regulate how much food to feed the plant. And if you have enough, microbial activity going on in your soil, those microbes will regulate how your plants get fed. And if you have the proper fertilizer, it will not leach and it will not pollute the waterways. So that's what, my son spent 3 years in R&D. He was extracting microbes, from compost piles, sending them off to laboratories to identify which microbes went with which plants, and came out, with a product. And we, feel that our product is unique. We feel our product will never, ever harm a plant, and we know it does not leach into your rivers, ponds, and other waterways. But yes, if you use a chemical fertilizer, it will leach into your waterways. If you use, some organic products will leach, others will not. But you have to, do your research and find out which ones are going to be beneficial for you and beneficial for the waterways.
Okay, the next question is, if I grow a cover crop like winter rye, don't I need to till it in?
You don't need to till it in. You can let it die off. I'm assuming, winter rye dies off, and you can use it, as compost, and just, let it die off on the top, let the roots die off, in the soil, and, or, if you need to mow it, chop, chop it up so that it decomposes more quickly. But basically, you could use it as compost.
Okay, the next question is it okay to use a liquid fertilizer on my potted hanging plants, such as Miracle-Gro Bloom Booster?
Okay. So, when we, again, I'll get back to our business. When I'm going to hold up a bag of our fertilizer, and we now say the organic alternative to chemicals. When we started our business 12 years ago, we said the organic alternative to Miracle-Gro. And our attorney told us we were going to be sued. And sure enough, it probably took 4 or 5 years, but Miracle-Gro sued us. And, we basically took off that and said, okay, we'll just take it off our label. But Miracle-Gro is a chemical. Miracle-Gro does have a lot of salt in it. Miracle-Gro can burn your plants. Miracle-Gro will stimulate your plants. You'll get, growth from that, but we're not sure and if Miracle-Gro will stimulate your plants too much. Are they growing beyond their maximum genetic potential? So you may get tall plants, but was the plant genetics to grow that particular species of plant 1 foot? And if the plant is 1 foot 3 inches, that's beyond its genetic potential. And that's not good for the plant because then it becomes more susceptible to pest and disease. So you want to grow your plants as much as possible, but only to their genetic potential. And chemicals can grow plants beyond their genetic potential. So, we don't recommend using chemicals at all on the basis that you can do more harm to your plant. There are good bloom, bloom, I guess they emphasize blooms, and there are good products out there. But again, do the research to determine if I would recommend an organic product versus a chemical product to basically grow your plants.
Okay, the next question is, what is the easiest way to test soil health in new areas with the intent of growing edibles?
There's extension services. We have them here in Massachusetts. You can bring your soil sample to your independent garden center like Kennedy's. I know there's a new program out that are being offered to garden centers, where you can get results quickly. But there are various sources to test your soil health. Now, I'm going to say something that's, most people may disagree with. But if you have the appropriate microbial activity going on in your soil, those microbes will adjust the pH level so that you have the appropriate pH going on in your soil. So you want to get a diversity of microbes in your soil so they'll adjust it naturally. We go out into the forest, go down to the Blue Ridge Mountains in the springtime, and go look at all the wildflowers that are growing down there and the diversity of wildflowers. Nobody is fertilizing those, the forest, nobody's fertilizing those wildflowers. They're growing on their own because of the diversity of the microbial activity that's occurring within that type of soil that's beneficial for those type of plants. So yes, you can sometimes you need to go get a soil test because you want to grow a specific type of plant. But again, I say if you have the diversity of microbes, then you can grow any type of plant you want. And I'll go back to our business and what we did in our fertilizer. Number one, we didn't know where you were going to live, whether it be in Florida, where it's warm most of the year, or up in Maine, where it's cold a good portion of the year, or in Oregon, where the soil is, there's a wet atmosphere, or Arizona, where it's dry, or someplace where you got sandy soil, or in Indiana, where you got clay soil, etc. So what we said to ourselves is we have to put as much diversity as physically possible into our fertilizer. And there's reasons for that. And remember that the name Mycorrhizae, which is one of the key fungi microbes. Let's say there's 20 different types of mycorrhizae. And let's say you have a cherry tree in your backyard and you got a tomato plant and you got a a flower. Well, each one of those attract a different type of mycorrhizae. And, some fertilizers have X number of mycorrhizae in it. So if they don't have the mycorrhizae that gets attracted by that cherry tree, then there won't be that mycorrhizae fungi around the root zone of your cherry tree doing the job that that cherry tree mycorrhizae fungi should be doing. So what we said is we're going to put every commercially available species of mycorrhizae into our fertilizer. So, if you look at it on the back of our bag, you'll see all types of species, but you won't see every species because we said we're not going to give away, our formula to the competition. But what you want to do is find a fertilizer that has as much diversity in microbes as you can, because that's going to feed your plants the best way.
Okay, the next question is, can semi-decomposed vegetable scraps be dug into the soil to feed earthworms?
Yes, definitely. They'll decompose further, and some people make their own compost, and that's great because it's, just helps feed the soil. The issue with compost is, how do you know when it's fully decomposed? And if you buy it from a garden center, is it fully decomposed? Most of the time I'm going to say yes, sometimes no. You want to basically, go to a garden center that has a great reputation like Kennedy's and buy from them because they will sell you decomposed compost. I bought an organic compost from Kennedy's a number of years ago. That was phenomenal. It was expensive compared to regular compost, but the results that you get are just tremendous. And the other thing you got to watch out for is, what if that compost, it has pest and disease in it? What if it has weed seed in it? So just be careful as to what you do. If you're making your own, tremendous. Just know how to make compost so it gives the best results that you can get.
Okay. There are so many steps to lawn treatment which I have never used. How do you propose lawns be treated organically throughout the year for a fertilizer phobic?
Got a fertilized phobic. Wow. That's a great question, and I'm going to give my phone number out, our address out, our website out, my email. I don't know how to answer that question right off the top. I'd like to get my son involved in that one, and we will respond to that answer. If you call us or if you email us, we'll get the appropriate response to you.
Okay. The next question is, if you don't till the soil, how do you get the compost into the soil?
You can scratch it in. So, when we know tilling is required at some times, but you want to till the least amount as possible and, scratch it in, put it on top, let it decompose, scratch it in again, but try not to really, go too deep and disturb those microbes.
All right, the next question. Should I plant something in the soil for the winter months?
If at all possible, yes. Those microbes, they get active and then they get deactive. And some are active during the winter. Some are active, get active at 40 degrees, some others at 55, some at 60, some at, very dry soil conditions, some at wet soil conditions. So there is activity always going on, usually less during the winter, but definitely, if you can grow a cover crop during the winter, do it, because you're feeding those microbes again. The other thing, I said we put in a whole bunch of diversity into our fertilizer. Let's take a plant as good as Kennedy's Garden Center is. They're bringing in plants from growers and nurseries, all around the country. And Kennedy's doesn't know what that grower did. Did the grower use a pesticide? Did the grower use a chemical fertilizer? Is there any food in the soil in the plant that you just bought? So we said to ourselves, we don't know the answers to those questions. So we're going to put the food for the microbes in our fertilizer, so that if you come home with a plant that has sterile soil and you used a fertilizer like Organic Plant Magic, you're then feeding the plant appropriately with the fertilizer, but you're also feeding the microbes appropriately, so they have a chance to live until that plant starts to feed the microbes also.
All right, the next two questions kind of go together. It said, for planting in the winter, what would you suggest? I've heard some type of rye. And then the next person said, so Kerry, do you recommend that we overplant something like winter rye on a garden for winter and then lightly till it in the spring?
My answer would be yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question is, and this is the last one for now, do you recommend adding eggshells or coffee grounds to your soil?
Coffee grounds, I've heard, are great. Eggshells, I've heard, two versions. One version, they're very good, as a source. But the other version is that the sharp edges of the eggshell actually, can cut up worms and do damage to, other living organisms within your soil. So, I've never done eggshells, but I know people have.
Okay, that's the last question for now.
All right. So if I may, what I'd like to do is just tell you some of the results of having a great, condition of soil. And these are dynamic. They basically, they relieve soil compaction. So it improves soil aeration. It builds the water holding capacity. They supply elements, and they're, all kinds of elements. What is there, 13 different plant elements. And then there's many trace minerals that are required by your plants. You're going to improve germination. You're going to extend your rooting depth and the development of those roots. You're going to enhance the capacity for drought and stress tolerance. You're going to conserve water, so you'll reduce irrigation. You're going to solve erosion and poor drainage issues. You're going to outcompete those undesirable plant species. You're going to break down persistent environmental toxin contaminants that inhibit plant growth. So these microbes, they've been proven, and they've actually been taken to where there's been oil spills. They'll consume chemicals and they'll get rid of the toxins. With our fertilizer, we've experienced one situation in 12 years where our fertilizer actually burned a whole section, and we had a garden center doing tests, and they did a test in 10 by 12 areas, and they planted in patients in each of these areas. One section had been treated by chemicals previously for the past 10 to 20 years. There was so much chemical deposit in that soil that our microbes ate all those chemicals and then dispersed them to the roots of the plant zone. And that burnt the plant and killed basically those impatiens. And the garden center owner there said, wow, we've never seen anything like that. And then they replanted, and they had, we have a garden center who says he had so much salt from road salt across the front of his garden center, and he used our product, and he had knee-high impatiens. And he said, I've never seen anything like it. These impatiens are going crazy because of what you've got in your fertilizer. So you can definitely get rid of contaminants. So my caution to you is, if you use chemicals for years and years, and you go out and you use an organic fertilizer that has microbes that are going to consume it, don't put any seeds or plants in for, I'm going to say, at least 2 weeks, if not 3, until those microbes consume and get rid of the toxins, and then put your plants in. So you're going to amplify plant vigor, color density. You're going to increase flowering and fruit, and you're going to get superior foliage with resilience to pest and disease. Pest and disease are really only doing their job. They're Mother Nature's, cleanup crew. They take out the weak. And so if your plant is not strong, if it's not resilient, it will be taken out by pest and disease. And that's why you want to feed it in an organic way, so it does become strong, it does become resilient to that pest and disease. You're going to, basically you're going to build healthy, nutritious, living soil. You're going to feed your plants on demand. Okay, so with a chemical fertilizer, you're feeding your plants when you feed it. With an organic fertilizer, the plants are feeding themselves when they want to be fed on their own schedule. So this symbiotic relationship between the microbes and the plant roots, the microbes are being sent signals by the plant root and are being told when to bring the appropriate element. So if the plant already has enough nitrogen, the microbe is intelligent enough not to feed the nitrogen today. If the plant has enough calcium, then the microbe doesn't bring the calcium. And the same thing with all the other essential elements and all of those trace minerals. An organic approach will feed the plant when the plant wants that appropriate nitrogen, calcium, etc. And that's why, there's a difference, say, between a tree, a shrub, a vegetable, and and your annuals or perennials. Your annuals and your perennials are going through very, very quick growing cycles. Your trees, your shrubs are longer term growing cycles. So we say you could feed a tree and a shrub twice a year. You may have to feed your lawn once a month during the growing season, but you probably should have to feed your annuals, your vegetables, your perennials once a week, your hanging baskets, once a week, because they're going through a much quicker growing cycle. They're absorbing nutrients more quickly. And so if you don't apply enough nitrogen, calcium, boron, magnesium, etc., then your plant's not going to grow to its maximum genetic potential. And calcium, we call calcium the pickup truck. It's like, if you have a regular car, you can only fit so much in your trunk. If you have a pickup truck, you got a bigger bed space or cargo space to put more in. The calcium is like that pickup truck, is because as it's being brought to the plant, it's carrying along other essential elements and trace minerals, with it. So if you have the appropriate amounts of calcium in your soil, it's going to help feed that plant at the appropriate time. It's what you want to do is create the environment in your soil that builds your soil, feeds your soil, and grows your plants and prevents pest and disease all at the same time. That alleviates you from doing a lot of work and spending extra time working in your garden. And a lot of people enjoy working in the garden, but you'll be able to enjoy your garden more. And that's what we really want, is for you to sit back when you want to, look at those beautiful flowers, eat that vegetable or fruit, and enjoy the taste of it. And if you create that proper soil environment, that's what you're basically going to do. What I'd like to do, well, first I'd like to answer any more questions. And
okay,
then
we have one more question.
All right.
I have off-the-ground planter boxes that I plant vegetables in. Would the organic fertilizer keep the microbes in the planter boxes, or would I need to add microbes each year?
Great question. I think, we talked at the beginning of the conversation that chemicals are coming through the air and, landing on your property. And therefore they're killing off some of the microbes. So until, we as human beings eliminate chemicals, throughout the world, we're going to be in a situation that, we have to replace these microbes. And some microbes, get eaten by other microbes, like the bacteria and the fungi get eaten by the protozoa. But some microbes also replicate themselves on a consistent basis. And so you have to replace them. So you have to fertilize in order to keep, the appropriate number of microbes in those boxes. And that's unfortunate, but that's, how we live today, and that's what we need to do. And you also want to make sure that you got the appropriate balance of microbes in there. Remember, there's a ratio, and it depends upon what type of plant you're growing. Should you have more fungi than bacteria, or should you have more bacteria than fungi? And that's another whole webinar. But again, if you purchase the right type of fertilizer, you're going to have the right combination, and you're going to have the right results that you want. And then, another, I'm going to promote ourselves. We make a fertilizer, and we also make what's called a compressed soil. And our compressed soil is infused with our fertilizer. So we know you have the right microbial activity when you plant your plants. And our soil is going to retain the moisture longer. And it also has worm castings in there. It's just, it's good food, for your plants, and it's a good soil environment.
All right, that's all the questions.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. I really appreciate your questions. Every time I, do something like this, and I give presentations at garden centers, and, I've done them at the Boston Flower Show and trade shows, and I always learn something. So thank you again for your participation and your questions. And what we'd like to do is provide you with an offer, actually two offers. One, if you go to our website, organicplantmagic.com, and you purchase either our fertilizer or a combination package of soil and fertilizer, you can use a discount code. And the discount code can be used once. You can give it to a friend also if you'd like, and they can use it once. And the code is Kerry, my name, Kerry 10, like the numeral 10, 10. And that'll give you a 10% discount offer of any of the products that we offer on our website. I also enjoy, taking phone calls, or if you want to visit, our home, you're welcome to. And, we have some stock here of our products. And if you want to purchase it directly, from me, you're welcome to do so. You'll actually get a little more of a discount because, we don't have to pay fees on our website if you pick it up from us. And you can buy whatever quantities you want from us. I'll give you our phone number is 781-834-4889. My email is Kerry, Kerry, @organicplantmagic.com. And our address is 115, that's 115 Cross, CROSS Street in Marshfield. Please call, if you would like to come over. Please call if you'd like to discuss an individual question, and or email us, and we'll get back to you. We really enjoy speaking with you. We find we learn more and we improve our business more by getting feedback. So we appreciate it when you do contact us. And again, thank you very much for being here today. And I hope you go out and enjoy your gardens and have a successful year.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Kerry, for a very informative seminar.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bye-bye, everybody.